There were strange things happening on the banks of the Jordan River, and news of those strange things was spreading like wildfire throughout all of Israel. There were things that nobody could explain because God was doing something new. But God's new thing was not happening in the temple, and it wasn't happening in Jerusalem. And nobody could understand what was going on. You see, what most people realized is that God was acting on the wrong side of the tracks, about as far away from Jerusalem as anyone could get. And what was even stranger about that was the person who claimed to be God's representative in the midst of all of it. So listen now to some of the things that were happening on the banks of the Jordan River in John 1, starting with the 19th verse. This is the testimony given by John when the Jews sent priests and Levites from Jerusalem to ask him, "Who are you?" He confessed and did not deny it, but confessed, "I am not the Messiah." And they asked him, "What then? Are you Elijah?" He said, "I am not." "Are you the prophet?" He answered, "No." Then they said to him, "Who are you? Let us have an answer for those who sent us. What do you say about yourself?" He said, "I am the voice of one crying out in the wilderness, 'Make straight the way of the Lord,' as the prophet Isaiah said." Now they had been sent from the Pharisees. They asked him, "Why then are you baptizing if you are neither the Messiah, nor Elijah, nor the prophet?" John answered them, "I baptize with water. Among you stands one whom you do not know, the one who is coming after me. I am not worthy to untie the thong of his sandal." This took place in Bethany across the Jordan, where John was baptizing. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. On Tuesday night, and perhaps it was already Wednesday morning, I woke up from the strangest dreams I had ever had. There were songs swirling around in my mind. One of those songs was a country song. And I know I had heard it before, but since I don't really listen to country music, I couldn't identify the singer or the title of the song. And all I can say is thank goodness that we have a staff that helped me with that. But I'll talk about that song in a few minutes. The other song that was playing over and over in my head was a song by the legendary rock band called The Who. Now, some of you are probably not even born when their music was being played. However, one of their more popular songs, you might know the lyrics to. It's called "Who Are You?" And it goes like this: "Who are you? Who, who? Now tell me, who are you? Are you? Who, who? I had this picture of them in their rock and roll regalia on the banks of the Jordan River, guitars blazing, amps blaring, and they were singing this song, while John the Baptist was sitting in his camel hair outfit with the leather belt and a plethora of half-eaten grasshoppers all around him. The look on his face, however, was the same look I would imagine he gave to the religious delegation that came to see him. It was incredulous and uninterested. You see, these people came, not the religious elite, not the Pharisees, but the second and third in command, right? The Levites and the priests, people who weren't really that important in the temple. So they were out there to find out what John was doing out in the wilderness. What was all of this going on out there that they had heard so much about? But you see, they really didn't ask John what he was doing or why he was doing the things he was doing. What they asked him is, who are you? What are your credentials? Who gave you the authority to do these things? What undergraduate degree do you have? What seminary did you go to? What synagogues have you already served in? Really, what they were asking John was about his identity, the very core of who he was. They wanted to know, who do you think you are? Who are you? Give us an answer. The core of our identity, or the people that we say we are, can be answered in a lot of different ways. Many of us have been asked, who are you? And some of us have been able to answer that question, at least on the surface, pretty easily. We are mothers, daughters, sisters. We are fathers and sons and brothers. And many people identify themselves by what they do for a living. Pastor, engineer, student, you name it. We self-identify by our role in our family and the things we do for a living. But John's question, the question that John is being asked, is a much deeper question. Tim Keller, an author, a pastor, and a great preacher, says that really our identity is about the core of our very being. It can't simply be answered on the surface, because the question about our identity is, who are we deeply inside of ourselves? What is the core of our being? And depending on how we answer that question determines in a large part our sense of self-worth. Now, when John was growing up, and in the ancient times, and actually even in some non-Western cultures today, your identity is given to you by your family, the clan that you were part of, even the community that you were a part of. So if you were a good mother, a good father, a great farmer or cabinet maker, you were highly esteemed in your community. And if you weren't good in any of those things, well, you weren't esteemed in your community. We don't really do that much today because our community doesn't help us necessarily form our identity. Instead, most of us today self-identify. Right? We know what we want to do, what we want to be when we grow up, so we identify ourselves in very individualistic ways. But our culture still has a say in who we are. If we take a really good look at our last names, if we do that kind of research back into our family history, we'll find out that actually our last names are really deeply embedded in the things that we do or did and the places we lived. DeSalvo, which is my maiden name, not only is a place, but it also talks about the kind of people that we were. My husband's name, Peckham, is not only a place in England, but it's reminiscent of a family that was supposed to take care of the Anglican Church. They were Anglicans, and their last name is rooted in their Anglican background. And so the culture, the clan, the community we lived in, formed who we were in a very early time. We don't do things that way anymore. We now determine our identity by our dreams, something that's not so stable, that can change from day to day. John the Baptist knew who he was because his family made sure he knew who he was. If we go back to Luke's gospel, we find that Zechariah, John's father, was told by the angel Gabriel that his aged wife and he would be having a son, and that son would precede the Messiah, and that this child was part of God's plan. Now, if John really wanted to, as he grew up, if he lived in this day and decided that that was not a good identity for him, he could have chosen something different. But let's just say he chose to be a priest, a Nazarene priest. Nazarenes couldn't cut their hair or drink wine. There were lots of rules around them. So let's say John decided that wasn't what he wanted to do. He didn't want to wear camel hair. He wanted to wear nice robes. He didn't want to go out in the wilderness. He wanted to live in a city. He could have chosen to do that. But instead, John chose to live out of the core of his being, the identity that he had received from God and from his family. John chose self-sacrifice over self-identification. The Pharisees didn't know what to do with that, and neither did the Levites and the other priests that went to talk to him. And so the first thing John says to them very clearly is, I'm not the Messiah. They don't even have to ask the question. I'm just not the Messiah, but I am the one who will point the way to the Messiah. That answer comes from the core of his being. So the next question, are you Elijah, actually makes perfect sense because, see, Elijah was supposed to precede the Messiah. And Elijah was this crazy prophet in the Old Testament. He wore weird clothes. His hair description was wild. He went around yelling at people all the time. So John the Baptist kind of fit that model. And so people assumed that's who he could be. And he said, no, I'm not Elijah. You see, John understood that out of humility, he didn't need to have a following. He just needed to clear the way for the Messiah. And then finally, the next question, are you the prophet? And he simply says no. Now, if you have ever tried to have a conversation where all you want is one straight answer, just answer the question, you can understand the frustration of this religious delegation. So they finally say to him, demand, who are you? Tell us who you are. And John's answer is, from the core of his being, I am the voice. He's not the greatest voice. He's not the loudest voice. He's not the most important voice. He is simply the voice of one crying out in the wilderness. There's no fanfare. It's just who he is. When I read those words, they make me so excited. Because what John realized is that he didn't have to earn his identity. He simply accepted it. It was a gift. This is the other song that I heard. It's called Who I Am by Jessica Andrews. And the words go like this. I am Rosemary's granddaughter, the spitting image of my father, and when the day is done, my mama is still my biggest fan. That song makes me so happy because most of us can self-identify that way, right? We can all identify through our families who we are at some level. I can go pretty far back. I am Anna and Josephine's great-granddaughter. I am Conchetta's granddaughter. I sort of look like my father. And at the end of the day, my mom is my biggest fan. And that makes me so happy, right? I just love the thought of I have this line of people who went before me, who loved me and cared about me. But the truth is that even that identity has to be earned at some level. We have to fall in line, obey the rules, and do the right things to earn our identities, even in our family systems. And the truth is there is no system on this earth that we don't have to earn part of that identity. It doesn't matter where you work, it doesn't matter where you play, it doesn't matter where you go to school, it doesn't even matter where you go to church. Part of your identity is always going to be earned in all of those systems. The only place your identity is not earned is the system that God has set in place. What John the Baptist knew, and what we all need to know, is that the identity that God gives us cannot be earned because it's a gift. It's simply a gift. And we call that gift grace. We don't earn it. We can't work for it. It is simply given. And what a beautiful gift it is. In a very little while, all of you confirmands are going to come to this altar, and you are going to affirm your identity as children of God. That is the very core of your being. You can't earn it, you can't learn it, you can't buy it. You already have it, and so do all of the rest of us. We can't earn it, we can't buy it, and we certainly don't deserve it. We simply have to receive it. When I look before me, and even when I looked in the mirror this morning, I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that I was a child of God. And as children of God, each one of us, we get to receive and claim this undeserved identity. And like John the Baptist, that identity should humble us. It should make us realize our place, but it should also empower us to speak boldly, because nobody can take that identity from us. It's ours. We are holy, beloved children of our Creator, who calls us, who names us, and who knows us. We are His, and He is ours. Thanks be to God. Amen.